just to get things kicked off, talk a little bit about what made you pick the book, and what challenges you found writing in it. And then I'm sure we all have a number of questions to add. I think we talked before you got on that, I mean, it was a pretty well-received book by all of us. And to be reading a book with one of the World Series teams was really kind of fun. So
right.
Anyway, so go ahead.
All right. Well, thanks for having me again. Good to see all of you. Probably like most of you, I had seen this photo, this iconic photo, and knew the photo and the incident, but not really what had happened before or after. And I first wrote an article for a short-lived baseball magazine called 108. Trivia question, why 108? Well, that's the number of seams on a baseball. Anyway, or stitches on a baseball. I wanted to find out what happened beforehand and put this event in its context. And so, if you read the book, you know that there was a civil war going on in the Dominican Republic, and Juan Marichal was on edge, worried about his family's safety. And then John Roseboro had just watched the Watts riots, and the neighborhoods burn, and was on edge himself. And then you've got this rivalry between the Dodgers and the Giants, which I maintain is the greatest sports rivalry of all time. And they're in a tight pennant race. They come into this pressure cooker in late August 1965. And so there's all these tensions that are mounting. And then during the series, of course, are the brushback pitches and high fastballs, putting guys in the dirt. And when Marichal came to bat, he had already put down a couple Dodgers, and Sandy Koufax offered to throw at him, according to John Roseboro, even though the word was that Koufax didn't throw at batters. He actually had, he hit Lou Brock in the ribs earlier in the season, and he was willing to do it when needed, but I think he had a fear of doing so because he didn't want to hurt guys. Anyway, Roseboro, the umpire already warned both pitchers, hey, don't do this, or don't throw inside anymore, or I'm going to kick you out. And so Roseboro didn't want to lose their ace in the third inning. So he said, let me take care of it. And he dropped the ball deliberately, threw it back right past Marshall's ear. And, I think it's important to pause for a moment and think about this. You're Marichal, you're in the batter's box, you're thinking, okay, the pitcher's going to throw at me, and he doesn't. And so you're kind of let down your guard a little bit, I think, and you're relaxed a moment. And suddenly this ball whizzes by your head, and just from 3 feet behind you, this guy rifles a ball past your head. And I'm sure Marichal said it nicked him, but whatever, even if it was just that close, it startled him. So he turned and to confront Roseboro, and he sees the catcher, who's known for being a tough guy, rising up in full gear, coming at him. And so Marichal backs up and in self-defense brings his bat down on Roseboro's head. Now, I know, everybody's mother will tell them, don't hit somebody in the head with a baseball bat. But I think it's good to put ourselves in Marshall's shoes and consider why he did what he did. Not to excuse it, but just to help us understand it. Anyway, so he does that. And then, of course, Roseboro, is angered and goes after him, and they have this 14-minute brawl, etc. But then the aftermath also intrigued me of how this event haunted both men. And Marichal, obviously, because he's the one who's fined and suspended, and it affects the Giants in the pennant race. They lose out to the Dodgers. But also, when he wants to get in the Hall of Fame, he is denied, because even though he has this great record, he's tarnished. His reputation is tarnished by this incident. So anyway, he when he calls up Roseboro, it's interesting to me, or was interesting to me, to learn that Roseboro was also tormented by this incident and his part in it. He had let Marichal take all the blame, but he was ready to reconcile as well. And then the way he went to bat for Marichal with this PR campaign, going down to the Dominican Republic, hanging out with him. I mean, think about that for a minute. Here's a guy who's been clubbed in the head by a baseball bat and is willing to forgive that man who did that and spend time with him, getting to know him. And what if we all could do that, you know, to people who harmed us in some real or imagined way, to sit down with them and get to know them and look at what we have in common. So it just became such a powerful story to me of reconciliation. And as I wrote this article, I thought there's a whole lot more to this story, and I could develop into a book, which of course I did. Some of the challenges you'd asked about in writing it, well, Roseboro had passed away by the time I took up this project, but he'd written a memoir, and so I was able to get his thoughts on the incident and his life from the memoir. I would have loved to have talked to him more, or talked to him actually himself. I did talk to his daughter. I talked to his wife. I was able to talk to Juan Marichal several times. That was helpful, filling in things. And then some of the other players, I didn't get a chance to talk to Willie Mays about the incident. I would have liked to have talked to him because, as you remember, he was one of the guys who helped break up the brawl, pulling Roseboro out because they were buddies. Also, Sandy Koufax, I've tried to reach him over the years for several projects, and he's never responded. I would have loved to have heard his thoughts because obviously he was on the mound and a key player in the events. But I was able to talk to enough other guys and watch the video footage and do enough other research that I felt like I was able to tell the story in a fairly complete way. Maybe I'll stop there because I'm interested in hearing what kind of questions you have and what you'd like me to go more in depth into.
Yeah, I mean, just as a follow-up to who you did talk to, I think I was a little surprised that Marichal agreed to talk. I mean, because it seemed like he just wanted the incident to be put aside, that I thought he probably doesn't want to talk about it anymore. So I was a little surprised by that. So good for you and good for him that he was able to talk more.
Yeah, I think I ran into him in Cooperstown during an induction weekend. I was there to trying to remember if I was there as a fan or I was probably doing both, you know, just enjoying the day and also doing some research while I was there, because my trips to Cooperstown tend to involve both. But I told him about the idea, what I wanted to do, and he said he was open to talking to me, and which did sort of surprise me. But I also thought, you know, maybe he had some things he wanted to get off his chest. Maybe he was just being polite. But I ended up, you know, following up with a phone call, and it took a little while for us to connect, find a good time to talk. But then, like I said, we had a couple of phone conversations, and he was forthcoming, and I appreciated that.
At the beginning, you talked about the pressures both guys were under, and I wondered, you know, in 1965, you still have somewhat segregated locker rooms where, you know, African Americans hung out with African Americans, Latinos hung out with Latinos. How much did teammates, you know, particularly the white teammates, understand the pressures both Roseboro and Marichal were under?
I imagine most of the white teammates had no idea. I mean, even today, I think most white Americans have no idea about, or a very little idea. Maybe there's a growing awareness, you know, post George Floyd, but of what it's like to be a Black person in the United States and to have that experience and to suffer daily, you know, the multiple or multitudes of microaggressions and overt aggressions, and suffer from the implicit bias and overt bias that runs rampant in all of our psyches. So, and systemically in our society. So I can only imagine in 1965, most white ball players had no idea what a guy like John Roseboro was going through watching the Watts riots. At the same time, I think most Americans had no idea what it was like to be a Latino in the United States or a Hispanic person in the United States, and to be maligned and ridiculed the way that the sporting news would, with making fun of guys' speech like Minnie Minosa and Roberto Clemente, especially, were mocked early in the late 50s, early 60s. Anyway, so I think they had no idea. And then to be a dark-skinned Latino who didn't identify as Black primarily, but identified more as with class, and came from a totally different society. I think just most Americans, again, had very little idea. As today, I think very few Americans really understand what it's like to be a Hispanic immigrant in the United States. I happen to be married to one, a woman from Chile. And, still, I mean, most of us just know our own experience best naturally, and don't often take the time to consider what it's like to walk in someone else's shoes and to go through that experience daily. It's like being a man in the United States. We don't know what it's like to be a woman unless we sit down and listen to women and tell us what it's like to suffer the slights and injuries of misfortune in our culture.
So my follow-up.
Sorry if I'm edging on the political there, but
No, that's okay. I mean, this book was a lot about that.
I think one of the
we knew it going in.
Yeah, I think one of the things that inspired me is I'm moved by compassion to try to consider what it's like to live from someone else's experience. And, certainly Marichal, as a dark-skinned Latino, and he's faced a lot of discrimination. And so did John Roseboro as a Black man in the United States in the 60s. I mean, think about it. This was just after the Freedom Rides and the, Selma and all that was going on in the United States, and the Civil Rights Act had just been passed in '64. I mean, this was a much, much different time in the history of the United States. And so there were formidable challenges simply to being a Black person, walking out your door to start the day.
So my follow-up question, I think you've already answered, which was I was going to say, similarly, what did the fans know? And you've kind of already answered that one. So, Mike.
I've always had a problem with the logistics of how the ball got so close to Marichal. I mean, you got a right-handed batter and a right-handed catcher. The batter's got to step clear across the plate. Well, the catcher had to take 3 steps to his left in order to return a ball. Seemed to be return a ball that would even be questionable.
Catchable by the pitcher.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
It's not clear how this happened to begin with, or what actually prompted it to be. I know what they said, but I don't see how logistically.
Well, if you watch baseball closely, a lot of times there'll be a strike or whatever, and the catcher, the batter will, his momentum or whatever, almost taken across the plate, and the catcher kind of throws it over his head, and a lot of times it's really close. I mean, I've watched this a lot. Wow,
I've just not seen any pictures of this one incident where he was
on that far across the plate. I wasn't a catcher, so I don't know.
It looks to me like it was clearly intentional. Something was either the offense was intentional, or Marichal took it more than he should have.
Well, I would think that if Roseboro wanted to hit him, he'd hit. He's a pretty active thrower. He had one of the best throwing arms in the majors at the time, as a catcher. So I would have thought if he wanted to hit him, he'd have hit.
John, you want to weigh in on this?
Sure, I agree. From 3 feet away, if Roseboro wanted to plunk Marichal in the head, he would have. But the way he tells it, he deliberately dropped the ball and then scooped it up, and so then he's sort of in his crouch, and he is able to shift so that he can throw it back close to Marichal. I don't believe Marichal that it nicked him, but I think that it came close enough to startle him, obviously, because that's what prompted him to turn around and confront Roseboro. The television footage, is typical of the time, cut from the view behind the pitcher to the catcher catching the ball back to Koufax on the mound. So we don't actually see that in the television footage, what happened. So we're left to the accounts of the players and to our imagination of how it happened.
Mike.
Mike Curtin, I've got a follow-up question to Mike's. In searching for video footage of the incident, of course, most of the searches are on YouTube, but wherever you search for video, those first several seconds are not there. The videos pick up where they're already fully in combat, out well in front of home plate, approaching, almost a pitcher's mound. And so in trying to decipher what did occur in those first several seconds, maybe the first 6 to 8 seconds, if not more, we're left with, you know, the various textual accounts, and I've read a lot of them. There seems to be no disagreement that after Roseboro whizzed that ball past Marichal's head, Marichal basically said, "Why you do that?" using the Spanish word for asshole. And according to your account and several others, Roseboro started coming at him and basically said, "F you and your mother." And in one account, and it's the only account I found, and this is in a book titled 40 Years a Giant, The Life of Horace Stoneham, written by Stephen Trevor, copyright 2021, so a fairly recent book. And it's a pretty detailed book. I'm impressed with it. It's the only account I found where, I'll read it to you, after Roseboro says, "F you and your mother," this account says, he then took a wild right-hand swing at Marichal, and then Marichal raised his bat above his head and brought it straight down. It's the one and only account I found where an author claims that Roseboro actually threw a punch before the bat came down. Do you have a take on that?
Well, I know Stephen, and did he try quote or cite a source on that?
No.
Because the only thing I can imagine is he's, you know, a witness told him that, and most likely a player on the field who was close enough to observe that, or if there was some fan like home video. You know, remember, obviously this is before everyone had a cell phone that they could take video with, and so there were some people who I'm sure in the stands who had video cameras, but again, they would have probably been grainy and from a distance. So I don't know. I mean, I didn't come across that in my research, but that's why I'm curious where Stephen got that.
Mark?
Well, thinking about that, it seemed like something that kind of instigated the fight was that he was afraid that Roseboro had taken off his mask and was holding his mask. I can't imagine he took his mask off with his left hand, since that's where his glove was. So I think it would have been hard to throw a punch with the mask in his right hand.
Most of the accounts say he dropped his catcher's mitt.
It sounds like the blow, you know, glanced off the mask because it cut him on the side of the head, and so I'm guessing it glanced off the mask. It may have dislodged the mask itself.
Well, Marichal, in your book, Marichal says he went after him when he saw that the Roseboro had his mask in his hand.
Okay, well then, that's probably what I thought. I'm sorry, I wrote it over 10 years ago, so I'm just going with memory. I'm looking to see if there's a photo here, but I don't see one.
I have two questions. Well, this prompted another one. Did the throw make it back to the picture?
Yeah, Koufax caught.
So it was, if it nicked Marichal, it barely nicked him. If it made it back to the picture accurately on a fly.
Right.
My second question, before this game, weren't the two of them friendly? I don't want to say friend, but friendly, cordial? But I thought I remember reading that in your book.
Yeah, I think so. They, you know, known each other, and I think been on an all-star team together, but you know, not like they're buddies or anything, but you know, they might say hi.
But they would say hello when they see each other, you know, out warming up or whatever. And so, I mean, based upon that, obviously something during this game triggered the anger between the two. You know, I don't know if it was bench jockeying or
Those brushbacks.
I think it was earlier in the
brushbacks, yeah, but
earlier in the series as well. There was some wolfing going on back and forth between players and the teams, but I don't think Marichal and Roseboro had a history themselves prior to that series.
Right, yeah.
Of bad blood, anyway.
Right. Thank you.
In the aftermath, I mean, we see the kind of the famous photos of Willie Mays, you know, kind of grabbing. I'm sitting here wearing a Willie Mays jersey, so I mean, I think highly of Willie. But anyways, that to me seemed like the key event or turning point of the fight that allowed things to like settle down, is because you had Willie stepping in and grabbing the, Roseboro, the rival guy. Anything to add on that?
Well, just, I think probably what I said in the book, that Mays probably helped things from getting worse and helped calm things down by removing Roseboro, because as you can imagine, he was pretty heated.
Yeah.
John, a question and then a comment to give context to why I asked you. The question is, since Marichal's induction into the Hall of Fame, do you think his reputation has gone up, gone down, or stayed stable? And the reason I ask that is, of course, there's all these rankings everywhere. We have access to, ranking the greatest players of all time, ranking the pitchers of all time. Some are very war dependent, others are not, all that dependent on modern SABR analysis and so forth. But one, for example, that's got a tremendous amount of attention was Joe Posnanski's the Baseball 100, his rating of top 100. And in reading that book, I was struck that of the 29 pitchers that made his top 100 players of all time, Marichal was not listed. While guys like Bly Levin, Fergie Jenkins, Phil Necro, Mike Mussina, and others, were in that. And so I looked at it, I thought, well, he's very war dependent in that list for the most part. Although guys like Rivera, Koufax, Satchel Paige had wars far below Marichal's. And so that's just one example, but there's lots of examples where Marichal doesn't seem to make the list of top pitchers of all time, when he clearly was the dominant pitcher of a decade of the 60s. The only guy close to him statistically, in terms of the old time statistics, was Gibson. And for the most part, it's a Gibson versus Marichal argument for the most dominant pitcher of the 60s. But Marichal doesn't make a lot of lists, including Posnanski's. And I'm just curious why. And is he one of these guys who just needs to be constantly rehabilitated? Perhaps because of the Brawl, or perhaps of other factors.
Yeah. Well, obviously, good question. And I don't have the definitive answer of what's going on with Posnanski's mind and analysis, but I think it does point to the fact that, yes, I'm sure it factors into some people's assessments of Marichal. There's so many factors, which I think is one of the things that makes baseball fascinating. Who's the greatest hitter of all time? Who's the greatest player of all time? Who's the greatest pitcher of all time? And who's more valuable to a team, a pitcher, or a position player? And so there's so many factors, whether it be war, whether it be old-fashioned statistics or old-time statistics, whether it be, how guys did in the clutch, number of awards they won, World Series, victories. You look at Koufax, he was good for 6 years, but he was not that good for 6 years as well. And so, but I think probably most people's minds, he stands out as one of the greatest pitchers of all time, the left arm of God. And you look at the no-hitters and the perfect game and the World Series victories. And so, yeah, the guy, Koufax holds up. But to my mind, yes, Marichal deserves that recognition. And certainly as the dominant pitcher of the 60s, and I put him right up there with Gibson as peers during that time, and a Koufax as well. So I think, it's hard to say again what all the factors are that people are considering in these rankings, but it makes for interesting discussion and debate, I think, about where a player's rightful place is in the pantheon.
Thank you.
Sorry, Stan, I'll get you next.
This is
Okay.
just growing up in the '60s. I'm with Mike. Growing up in the '60s, I considered Marichal the best right-handed pitcher in baseball when I was a kid. I mean, bar none. I mean, other than Gibson was close, but I've always ranked Marichal above him. Yeah. And of course, you got lefties because that was the days of Sandy Koufax. Anyway, this game was actually on TV live.
Mhm.
And I was watching it with my dad, who was drinking his normal Saturday afternoon bottle of Blatt's beer. Those of you that remember Blatt's.
I do,
Now,
Grandpa.
born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, and John was just from 70 miles up the road. And I was always kind of brought up to worship all the Columbus guys or the Ohio guys or whatever. So I was a big Roseboro fan. I remember my old man went nuts when this happened. He was sitting there, and I mean, he went bonkers, you know. You know, Roseboro's brother, he played football for Woody Hayes in Ohio State. And I think that's in your book. Later became city councilman here in Columbus, Ohio. But anyway, so I'm somewhat partial over all the years, although I love Marichal too. So I was like sad that this whole thing happened because I love Johnny Roseboro, and I thought Marichal was the best right-handed pitcher I'd ever seen. In fact, I'm sharing some programs and stuff here with the guys. I actually attended 2 games where Marichal was the starting pitcher, one in Old Crosby Field in Cincinnati and the other at 1973 out in Candlestick Park in San Francisco. But anyway, just a recollection. I was actually sitting there watching the game, and back to Mike's point he made earlier. I don't remember a whole lot. I was 11 years old, but I do remember that they kind of cut out the whole part about the throw going back to the picture. And the next thing you know, on the screen was these 2 guys going at it, and the bat going across the the top of Roseboro's head. That's kind of how I remember it. But anyway, just wanted to share that with the group.
Stan?
Yeah, I got a couple questions for you, John. Were there any repercussions, like the next time the teams played, regarding this whole thing? And one thing that I forgot about that was in your book, the second question, was that I kind of forgot that Marichal became a Dodger later on. I mean, what was that like for him? Was there anybody left that was on that Dodger team when this whole thing happened?
Yeah, Walt Alston.
Well,
Who's his manager?
the biggest, I think most anticipated showdown was when Marichal and Roseboro faced each other again. And so that happened in spring training. And I recount that, spring training 66. And I think the press made more of it. The players, I'm sure, were aware of the fact that they're facing each other again, but it seemed anticlimactic. I mean, nothing, there were no visible repercussions of that. But as far as when, I think it was 75 when Marichal came to the Dodgers, and I can't remember who all was still on the team from that time, but Roseboro had certainly left. But he, must have been awkward for Marichal simply to put on that jersey, given the history of the Giants-Dodgers rivalry, and also then to walk in that locker room with the clubhouse with those guys, and then too within the context of that incident in his past. But Roseboro had lobbied on his behalf, as you'll recall, to help for people, Dodger fans and the players, to give Marichal a chance because he thought that Marichal could help the team. And then, of course, when Marichal stumbled and didn't do that well, he thought, I'm not earning my money. I'm going to bow out here. Word for another team, he might have stuck around. I don't know, but it certainly, I'm sure it was an awkward moment that first time Marichal walked in the Dodger clubhouse.
So was there the next time the teams played? I don't remember. I thought this whole incident happened on a Sunday, but I may be wrong there.
Yeah, it was the 4th game of that series, so I don't think they played again that season.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So it was the spring training 66 when they faced off again.
The next matchup, yeah. Okay, thank you.
There was already this rivalry entrenched, but what did the fans in the following years, did that have fans thinking things could get too far out of control, or did it just further fuel the rivalry between the fans, where a Giants fan wouldn't go to a game in LA or vice versa?
Well, I'm sure for those who, saw or witnessed or read about the incident, which would be all Giants and Dodgers fans at the time, it colored their perspective. It was fuel for the fire, as you mentioned, the idea that the Giants suck or the Dodgers suck, depending on which side you were rooting for. And here's yet another reason why they're the bad guys. And so there was just more reason to embrace your team and dislike the other team. And dislike's probably too soft word, to hate the other team. I think that's really how characterizes the feelings the fans had, you know, this intense loyalty to their team and an immense animosity toward the rivals.
You know, when you think of Marichal, he always ranks among the top 6 or 8 screwball pitchers of all time. And obviously his windup was one of the most distinctive windups of all time. And so I read your stuff and during the World Series comparing our era of the 60s versus the era now. I found myself wondering sometimes, whatever happened to the windup and whatever happened to the screwball? Neither one seems to exist anymore.
Right. And the other, Tug McGraw comes to mind too, as a great screwball pitcher of the 70s and also as a character. But and we still have the characters, but I think, you know, the mechanics have changed and you know, we've gotten far more sophisticated with the instruction that pitchers get and how they deliver the ball. And I think one of the things that made Marichal so remarkable in my mind was not just the windup, but the different pitches he threw. I think he had 5 pitches and different arm slots, you know, the ways he could throw them. And so if you're a batter and you're seeing a ball come from a different position, you're expecting a different pitch, but you know, he could throw the fastball from several different slots or the curve from several different slots. And so incredibly baffling to the batters and very effective, you know, and this of course is in the days when now pitchers simply try to overpower batters with their speed. But this was back in the day when you had to be a little more cunning, I think, and perhaps more finesse was involved, and Marichal possessed those abilities to baffle the batters and have the success that he did, which to me makes him, again, that much more interesting and fascinating and great as a pitcher.
I thought it was interesting early on that he was a sidearm pitcher until he, I guess, signed with the Giants, and I forget who the pitching coach was that convinced him that you're not going to make it, you know, throwing nothing but sidearm, and got him to come straight over the top and then mix in the other arm angles and everything.
Yeah.
Was it? Oh, Hubble? Yeah, I couldn't remember. Yeah, it was. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was still with the organization. Picture of Hubble.
John, I was only 9 years old when this happened. And I until I read your book, I did not know at all about the incident with Frank Thomas and Richie Allen. And it causes me to wonder whether it was because it was a white player hitting a black player, or baseball just the press didn't want to accentuate the violence. But any additional comments on that?
No, sorry. Like I said, it's been over 10 years since
Okay, fair enough.
I'm recalling more of that incident.
Yeah, I had a question about that spring training game the following year. And it took place in Phoenix, and that's, of course, the Giants trained there for years. But the Dodgers were still in Vero Beach. So they made a special stop. Is that how that was on their way back to Los Angeles? Did they make a special stop there in Phoenix to play that game, I guess, right? Said it was on April the 3rd, and then the season didn't open for another week or so.
Yeah. You know, again, a good question. I don't recall the particulars of how the Dodgers came to be in Phoenix for that game.
When they were in Vero Beach, they always stopped and
They always did that.
did a 3-game series with the Dodgers on their way back.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
So it was kind of odd that they go out of their way to
They did that.
have a confrontation like that, you know, but that was a yearly
Yes.
practice.
Yeah.
That on their way back to Los Angeles, they stopped
Yeah.
Phoenix and played it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Just want to add a little bit about the fan perspective. When this incident happened, I was sitting in Golden Gate Park watching a polo match with some folks and listening to the game on the radio. I think everybody's reaction was, well, Roseboro must have deserved it. That was the attitude of the fans in that era.
Interesting, because you wouldn't expect that, right? If you didn't know any of the backstory, you see a batter turn and club the catcher, and you wouldn't think, oh, the catcher was asking for it, because it was such an egregious incident. You know, there hadn't been something like that where a batter bashed the head of an opponent, and so I think that's what caused many fans to react to say this is, you know, unacceptable.
As you said, the feelings were pretty strong.
Mm-hmm. Right. And again, I guess people would probably line up, like Giants fans would say, oh, Roseboro must have deserved it. But I doubt any Dodger fans were saying that.
I'm not sure it was that unusual for the Dominican League. They were known to go after each other with bats, throw stuff at each other, hit umpires.
That I'm not aware of, knowledgeable about.
I can just say that I was born and raised in South Central Los Angeles, and I remember being off school for 3 days during that time because of the riots. They were getting closer to our neighborhood. And I, like Steve, remember watching that game on TV with my grandfather and him telling me that's not how people should act. And that's all he said.
beer?
No, he did not. But I remember that vividly too.
Sure.
So. Thank you, John.
Yeah, great book. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other wrap-up questions?
Well, and for the Giants fans too, or the Willie Mays fans, here's my latest book. You'll recognize that image.
Yep.
From the 73 World Series. And this recounts the 73 season, where Mays, back in New York with the Mets, goes to a 7-game World Series with the Oakland Athletics. And that's Mays is one of the storylines I traced through this season.
But what caused you to recover that book? Because I have the Hammer and Hank version. Yes.
You have this one.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
Well, the reason we decided to redo it, well, it's so hard to do this backwards, is this title, worst in the history of book publishing.
It's pretty hard to remember.
No one could remember it, but the greatest summer in baseball history, that sticks out in people's minds. So it was on the 50th anniversary of the 73 season that we decided to reissue it, and with a new cover, new title. And because I felt that the book never really got the attention it deserved with that bad title. And the publisher agreed, and now it's, you know, out there again and getting more recognition, which has been gratifying.
Yeah.
Are you currently working on another baseball book, or if not, what are you working on, any book at all?
You know, lately I've been working more on long form narrative magazine articles. So I just wrote a piece for Esquire magazine about an execution in Missouri, where the prosecuting attorney had said, hey, wait, our office made a mistake. We shouldn't be putting this guy to death. But the attorney general disagreed and the governor disagreed. And so they executed him last month, a man named Marcellus Williams, Jr. So I just did that long piece that'll come out soon in Esquire. I did a piece about a murder in Grand Marais, Minnesota, a small town, Minnesota, where the murder weapon was a moose antler. And that has all sorts of twists and turns. So I've been focusing more on long form narrative, like I said, long magazine articles, though I am working on a novel about the 1968 Chicago. It climaxes in the Chicago Democratic Convention.
John, I have an article here I'm going to pass around to the group that you wrote for. It was in AARP magazine.
Oh.
Ouch.
Johnny Dasco, I bet.
Yeah, He made
Wasn't
it to
that
the
fun?
show at 56, so I read this in the magazine after I read the book, so I immediately tore it out, meaning to pass around to the group, so.
Well, thanks. That was a fun story. That guy,
Yeah.
he stuck around and paid his dues and waited and finally got his break. But one of the things I enjoyed about him was he was a practical joker, and he would go, like he'd get called, a guy would get called up, to the big leagues, and he'd say, the players would say Johnny, the announcer, was actually the hitting coach. And of course, the guy getting called up, he didn't know who the guy, Johnny Dascow was. So Johnny would say, yeah, I want you to squish the bug. And the guy would be like, what? This is the major league advice I'm getting? They told me that when I was 7.
It was a great article.
Oh, thank you. It's fun to meet that guy. He's a good guy.
Yeah, it's interesting.
John, my last comment, I guess I'm just looking for your comment, but it did seem like Roseboro was on his way to possibly managing, maybe at the AAA level, until he wrote that tell-all book. And suddenly the Dodgers wanted nothing to do with it. And this is 1974, 75. But it seemed like he shot himself in the foot with that book. Is that how you'd read that situation?
Well, he may have. I mean, as you know, it wasn't until Frank Robinson got hired by the Indians to manage in 75 that there was a black man hired to manage a team. A little footnote that you can read about in this book. In 73, Maury Wills was actually the first black man to manage a team when the starting manager got kicked out and he filled in for the last few innings of a game. But, there was just, again, the racism was so deeply ingrained in baseball. I mean, Jackie Robinson did not eradicate racism in baseball by any means. And, we had Al Campana saying, telling Ted Koppel, that they just don't have the mental acuity to manage. And it's like he said what was unspoken by most general managers and owners and probably even fans. And so Roseboro faced a lot of challenges in getting hired as a manager. And, for him to write that book was just another obstacle he had to overcome to becoming a manager. And he wasn't able to surmount it.
Thank you. Any other questions? John, I appreciate you getting up and dusting off a book you wrote 10 years ago or so. We really appreciate it, as we did the first time, and we just really want to thank you for attending with us. I appreciate it.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate your interest in the book and wish you well there. I hope you're get through the off season and enjoy the next spring training.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, take care, guys.
Any concluding comments? I mean, I really enjoyed the book, obviously.
Great book.
It was
I had read the book shortly after it came out, kind of forgotten.
Same here.
Coming back to it a couple of weeks ago, I was really struck by how good it is.
Yeah.
Remarkable piece of writing.
I think for me, I knew not that much more than like what you learn from captions under, there's 3 or 4 iconic photos from that. And so we all kind of knew the 60,000 foot version of the story, but this added so much detail that I didn't know that I really enjoyed it. One comment about Steve Treader is at the national conventions, and Rick, I think you probably will, can confirm this. He often gave presentations on the social impact of baseball and the social impact of what was going on baseball. That, I mean, I always look forward to his presentations because they always, and he really focused on the 60s and the turmoil of the 60s. So I've seen him speak a number of times, and
Yeah,
he's
excellent.
a real scholar of that kind of.
Comes through, I mean, when I first saw this book on Horace Stone, I thought, who wants to read a book on Horace Stone? But the title's very, very deceiving because it's really about the Giants that happen to be owned by this guy and the incredible socioeconomic changes in baseball over that 40-year period of his art.
That was the Seymour Medal winner a couple of years ago, that book, as the best baseball book.
Really nicely
It
done.
was well deserved. There's another book on the father Stone. So you got books on both of them now that are out.
Well, I know when I see Steve's name on the, the presenters, I would always automatically just go to his, just because he's always well researched and had a high amount of energy for that area.
He used to be
Terrific
a regular
expertise.
writer, or maybe he was the editor for the baseball prospectus or one of those. I can't remember which one. He's very knowledgeable and on historical, socioeconomic, like you say, as well as all the SABR stuff.
One postscript on Gibson and Marichal is there's a marvelous book titled "The Greatest Teams of All Time." Subtitle as selected by baseball's immortals, and it's based on interviews, both archival interviews that were accessed from old line magazines. Asking the Ty Cobbs and asking the Honest Dragons, who's your all-time team, position by position. It's carried forward through the 70s. At any rate, both Marichal and Gibson were included in providing their all-time teams, and so each interviewee was asked to name the starting 8 plus a right-handed pitcher and a left-handed pitcher. And Gibson identified Marichal as the best he ever saw, and Marichal identified Gibson as the best he ever saw. So they were a mutual admiration society.
Yeah.
They were both terrific. That's not bad.
By the way, Steve passed around that card, those baseball cards. That's 64 Roseboro where he's catching. It looks like, to me, it looks like he's whistling. That was one of my favorite baseball cards as a youth, just because of just because of the expression on his face. It looked like Roseboro's whistling. And 64 was probably the first year that I was like buying packs of baseball cards. So to me, that first set and I didn't build a set that year, but
It's a great card, but
It's
I
a good-
still think he had a charge.
and he could have, but I just thought it was a cool card. So it brought back my childhood.
Do you ever wonder why when catchers got in a fight, they always take their mask off?
Not real smart.
Why not?
Oh, football player.
Well, I think there's a, I know, I think it's a fairness thing. I think people want to be fair. So,
That's not fairness.
Those hockey guys take their gloves off
Yeah.
to fight?
yeah.
Well, because your gloves not gonna hurt it. But those gloves are so padded, it's not gonna.
Get better to break it.
It's fair enough.
Any other-
We're gonna go to Jack Johnson route.
Any other comments on the book before we move into next book?
It did say it was a little inside curveball too. That might have been why he got over there.
Oh.
He called for it. Yeah, the book
I
said he
still-
called
I
for it.
Still don't know about how intentional that throwback was, but who knows? Only Roseboro knows.
Although Roseboro said in his memoir it was intentional.
Oh, did he?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, his
He always
memoir
had
is
some good-
titled "Glory Days with the Dodgers." It was written with Bill Libby, 1978. And he said, of course I provoked the incident. He said, I told Sandy I'd take care of it, and I did. He meant, if not to nick him, he meant to get his attention with a fastball right by the
He did
head.
have an accurate arm, but it seemed to me like he wanted to plunk it, beat a plunk.
I wondered if Mike knew Jimmy Roseboro when he was city council. I remember seeing him play
I only knew
number
of him.
43, I believe it was, for the Buckeyes.
When I was assigned to cover City Hall by the dispatch, Jerry Hammond had just been appointed to replace Jimmy Roseboro.
Oh, okay.
Jimmy Roseboro was working for the Boardman Company in an executive capacity for Boardman. And he was having
What
health.
was What year was that?
That would have been 77.
Did he get all that by his own accord or did John's celebrity help him along the way?
Oh, no, Jim Roseboro, if you look up his stats, at Ohio State, you know, he was, for 3 seasons, you know, as you know, you couldn't play as a freshman back in the day, but for his 3 seasons, he got a lot of carries, and his average, yard per carry was right up there with the top 3 guys. Woody used, 3 or 4 guys regularly in the backfield, and Jimmy was among the top 3. And his stats were very good, and he was a celebrity in his own right, as so many Buckeyes are in their day. And a lot of bigger employers wanted to employ ex-Buckeyes in corporate public relations, especially marketing. And he had that type of position with Borden. And then he was elected to council, but he wasn't on council very long. He resigned, and then Jerry Hammond was assigned to take his seat.
Probably first class guy, and well thought of. I read a little bit about his high school, even in Ashland. He was like 9 varsity letters, including baseball there. President of the senior class, or black people in school and all that. So I think he was, I don't know how to say this, he might have been a little better person. What we learned about John Roseboro and, you know, outside of the game and all that, so. Yeah. But anyway,
Better, but I don't know.
anyway, I'm just saying he was a first class.
John threw a
So
brush
he didn't,
back.
no, he didn't get in the city council because of John.
John threw a brush back pitch back to
No,
the
I
pitcher,
know, I'm
and
saying
he- and
all
he was
the other
divorced.
stuff.
And he was divorced. What else?
I'm not-
Come on.
We ready to move on to the next book?
Yes.
All right. The second and third place books from last time were Why We Love Baseball and The Comeback Season. If you recall, The Comeback Season was one of those oral history books of players from the Negro Leagues who I think
It was a 14-year-old kid that started Negro League players, and then got involved with the whole Rick Wood thing, and he got these guys pensions, and it was just a neat story.
okay.
About a 14-year-old kid that put all that together.
True story.
True story. There's a bunch of copies in the library.
There's 13 copies in the library.
What book is that? What is
It's called Comeback Season. So, and I think most of them were Negro League players that never made it to the bigs.
Right,
Is that-
some of them didn't know they qualified for the Major League Baseball pension plan they put together for them. And this kid did all the research to find out. And then they set up a museum there in Birmingham, the Southern Negro League Museum or something.
Is it season or seasons?
Season.
The second place finisher was the Poznowski book, Why We Love Baseball. The fourth place finish was the Church of Baseball by Bull Durham. I had 2 books added to the list prior to this meeting. Dave recommended we do They Bled Blue. It's a Jason Turbo book on the 81 Dodgers. I don't think so.
I think we did the East book by Jason.
Oh, maybe that was
We did,
it.
we did.
Yeah. I think I read it. After we did the book that you did, yeah.
And the other one, we voted on it before, but, you know, Mike would like to bring it back up, was the Louis Tion book, Son of Havana. So those are the 6 we have so far. And any others people want to throw on the,
Two, which I think, or I don't know, someone may disagree with me, but I think we're class guys. Stan Musial by George, how do you pronounce the name? Vesey, Becey. And Al Kaline, the biography of a Tigers icon by Jim Hawkins.
Do you have the stats on library, no library?
There are two musicals. I was looking at that.
Is that a fairly old book?
Two musical
I don't-
books.
I don't know what that-
Okay. Well, I know one of them has got to be pretty. Could somebody look that up just to make sure they're, see if they're in the library? And then it's, you doing that, Dave?
We don't have to vote T.I. He got voted down 3 times now, so I just got.
3 times? That's like a strikeout.
I know. The only reason I thought about was when he died, and second, when I was reading this book, I found his war was higher than Marichal's. It's still not in the hall, and I thought, that's something still not right with that whole thing today, but anyway, we don't have to vote for, we can take lead off, I think, if you want.
Well, if you think us reading the book's gonna get Tion into the Hall of Fame, I like patting myself on the back, but
It's just because he died, and I thought, we've been needing to read this book, and I just hadn't got around.
That's why I recommended the
Wait.
Dodger book. It's because
Is there a Pete Rose book
Alex
as
Whalen.
well? He just passed. I know he had trouble with Constantine when it was only.
yeah, and actually Charlie Hustle got exactly 1 vote last time. The latest one, Charlie Hustle got 1 vote. That was pre-death, so maybe he'd get 3 votes now.
He's been voted down several times.
Yeah.
Now, maybe because he passed away, it might change.
Robinson down the week he died.
Didn't you say you were gonna try to get the Charlie Hustle guy maybe for a separate
Yeah,
meeting?
yeah.
That'd be the way to do it if we wanted to.
Okay.
We've already done it, right? Essentially.
We did the Big Red Machine. I mean, it was just hard to pick a book because every book was like you changed the story with the next book, so it was,
This wasn't bad though. I read it.
okay.
What was the flavor?
Two copies.
How many books did you
All
want, or at least authors?
Okay, and what about K-Line? 2 copies from usual.
Comeback season looks like. That's something.
I mean, Stanza is a guy we should probably, I mean, I'd like to read about him. I'm not,
I think Kayline gonna read it also.
Did you say what you just said?
Uh,
2 copies?
there's 2 copies of the Stan Musial book.
I don't
see a
K-line book here. There are also ebooks and something else when I was looking it up.
Here's what, I'm gonna volunteer to do something before next week, just to let you know.
Okay,
I'm not guaranteeing success, but I'm gonna go to the library and talk to the librarian and see if they can get me a list of all the baseball books that they have in the library system. I would think they ought to be able to, in this day and age with computers there, and I would think they ought to be able to do that. I'm just gonna do that, just
All right.
to let you know, and if I'm able to do it, I'll have a copy for you Blake, before the
Okay.
next meeting.
Steve, they probably could append the number of copies also.
Pardon?
They might be able to append the number of copies.
Yeah, yeah. What's in the library, and how many copies of you have, every baseball.
it's just that's gonna change every
Well,
month, but
That is the only
Yeah,
book
starting.
I stand about Stan in the entire life.
I
he's
know.
not controversial enough. I mean, that was his problem.
Probably the same with
He
K-line, it's like,
I can't find Karen at all.
yeah, we didn't get in any trouble with it.
All right, I'm gonna take K-Line off the list since it's not a possibility. So here's the 6 choices. Tion, Why We Love Baseball, Church of Baseball, They Bled Blue, Comeback Season, and Stan Musial. Any others you gonna add? All right, those are the 6. Tion, Why We Love Baseball, Church of Baseball, They Bled Blue, Comeback Season. First round, 3 votes. Son of Havana. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Whoa. We've empowered our group here. All right. Why We Love Baseball by Joe Posnanski. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm sorry, Stan, I missed you in the first, you're 11. Did you vote for Son of Havana? All right, I forgot to count you. That's 10. This one's got 11. Church of Baseball. 1, 2, 3. 3. They bled blue.
20 votes, we get 3.
Yeah. 1, 2. Probably too close to another Dodger book. All right, comeback season. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Stan Musial. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Wait, still first round?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You can vote 3 times, right?
7.
We vote 3 times?
Yeah, 3 times.
Gotcha.
All right. So the top 3 are Havana, Why We Love Baseball, and Comeback Season. One vote now. Son of Havana, Why We Love Baseball, and Comeback Season. Son of Havana. 1, 2, 3. 4, sorry, thank you.
Gotcha.
Why We Love Baseball. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Comeback Season. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, 5. 6, 5, and 4. So Poznanski had 6. Comeback Season had 5, and Havana had 4.
I think this might be close enough for a recount.
In the margin of errors.
Actually, that's the second time in a row where the winner had 1 more vote than the second place and 1 more vote, and that had 1 more vote than the
We're
third.
gonna storm Blake's house at 3 o'clock this afternoon. I'll be there to cheer you on.
Let's see those ballots one more time. That's why I yell them out loud. All right, guys. I'm not sure when that'll be, but I'll certainly, it's probably 3 months out.
Late February, early.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how well it's counted the absentee
Somebody
ballot.
said,
How I did what?
We're not so sure how you counted the absentee ballots on the screen there.
What's the book about? That got voted in, Poznanski, what's it about? I mean, why we love baseball, but I mean.
50 most memorable in baseball history moments. And for the record, there's 32 copies in the library and 18 are available right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was a bestseller.
Yeah.
I voted for it because I got it as a gift and I haven't read it yet.
Oh.
I have no.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah, he wrote it.
All right. Stan, thanks for making it.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Any ending comments here before we break up? I'll see everybody in about a month. And we got time to get home in time for the kickoff. I'm actually gonna go down to Grinders, which is just down the street, for a quick sub before I get home. Anybody up for that, for joining me? All right. Bye.
We do have a date and membership meeting on November 16th. Anybody would like to attend? We have the general manager of the Champion City Kings there to tell us about the Woodbank College team.
That's the 16th.
16, downtown Dayton Library.
That's the former pirate,
No.
Rick White, yeah, he
take one to the head.
All right, we'll see you.
I fell like tripping.
Thanks, Mike.
It's an honor, Johnny Roseboro.
Yeah,
That's Johnny Roseboro.
Marichal got him.